attending, soon to be afternoons. For those of you on the call here, I'm not sure 100% your familiarity with Salesforce. They are a category captain in CRM management, but it's got a huge amount of potential in its case management object and how that can expand into Oracle integration. So we're going to kind of do a brief overview of some Salesforce terms and how those relate to this webinar, and then we're going to do not necessarily a deep dive into case management. We're going to do a very glossy overview on how it all works, from just building out a case types, record types, and so on. So with that said, I'm going to kind of go a little bit further on the PowerPoint here. So here's what we're going to cover in this webinar. Some of you in your professional lives that may have come across Salesforce and didn't realize it. They have two different modes, so to speak. They have a Lightning component and they have the Classic component. And most are people transitioning into Lightning. That's going to be the new, more modern UI. It's got a few more features, mobile, things like that. Classic, a number of you may have already seen at some point in time, whether you're at a department store and you saw a salesperson interacting with Classic. Chances are you have seen this mode, but we're going to be more concerned with the Lightning look UI of that. And then we're going to discuss case. What is a case? How do cases work? Who initiates cases? This is going to be the big driver for integration. This case module is incredibly powerful. It's very customizable. And then after that, we're going to discuss record types, queues, the difference between a queue and a list view. And that's going to be really important to understand the difference between those two things. So what is a case? A case is a customer's question, feedback, or issue. Support agents can review cases to see how they can deliver better service. Sales reps can use cases to see how they can affect the sales process. Responding to cases keeps your customers happy and enhances your brand. Now, I imagine you, those on the call, have one way, shape, or form dealt with a case, whether you reach out to your cable provider and you had a service outage and you received an email back in response, and that was essentially a case. You can use templates. There's many different ways you can do to can the cases and customize them to your user base, but that's essentially what it is. A case is some type of engagement with a customer or a client and the representative back and forth. So record types. Now, record types allow you to create a different page layout for different records within the same object. So in this object we're referring to is going to be the case object. It's where you can create different business processes, pick list values, and page layouts for different users. So imagine in an organization, if they had support agents and they had sales agents, well, you wouldn't want to use the same page layout for those particular individuals because the use cases would be different. So the idea here is we create different page layouts for the different users so that it's more applicable to their use case for that work stream. Now, how does that get managed, right? How do these different work streams get managed? Those get managed in queues. So in Salesforce, queues are a collection of records that doesn't have an owner. Users who have access to the queue can examine every record that is in it and claim ownership of the ones they want. Queues in Salesforce help to prioritize, distribute, and assign records to teams who share workloads. For example, if someone's in the service department of an industry, they can manage their service queue and take ownership of those specific cases that are in that queue. If someone's in the inquiry aspect of things, they can manage the inquiry cases and take ownership of those. And those two streams don't get crossed. The object, they are all cases, however, they get streamlined into specific queues. So how does one interact with these queues? Is they interact with those queues via their list views. List views are ways of displaying small sizes of data that are instantly accessible for different objects. List views are created by defining what data we want to see in the columns and also what fields they should be filtered by. So as I was saying, users interact with their cases via list views that are pulling from queues that are set up in the back end. And we're going to kind of go over those now in the platform. So if there aren't any questions in the chat, I will move on over to Salesforce. All right, so what we're looking at here essentially is the home screen of a very standard Salesforce platform. there's been nothing customizable. It's all out of the box. This is how it's going to look when you fire up your dev instance. And so what we're really concerned with here is the first thing we need to do is we need to really understand how users work and how licenses work. So we're going to head over to our little gear icon here, and we're going to set up a user. In order to manage cases, we're going to need some users to manage those cases. So this little object manager, the setup home screen here. Now, this one thing I want to call out is this home is not the same as the home page that we were on initially. This is just the home page for the setup module. So I hope you don't get confused by that main difference. So we're going to do, we got our administration here. We're going to click on users. And we're going to scroll down. And notice there's already quite a few amount of users in here, but we're going to make a new user. And we'll call this user very original Brian Jones. And we will give them. So one thing I want to point out here in the way that Salesforce handles logins, it logs in. So your username has to be in the form of a password. I'm sorry, I apologize. Your username has to be in the form of an email. It doesn't even have to be a valid email, but it has to be in the form of one. So I want you to notice this. If I change this, I can change it to Brian Jones, and let's say my favorite color is green. That's now my username. It doesn't affect the email that's associated and how that user will get emails, but it does affect how they log in. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So this user is going to be they're very important, and they are the Vice President of Services. And the company, they work for Creoal Consulting. Now, here's where it gets important. What license are they going to use to interact with the case module? So here, we're going to actually do the user license. We need to actually give them a role. So they're going to be customer support North America, and we'll do a user license of Salesforce platform. And that's all that we'll need. And we could go a little bit more customizable. We don't need to worry about the time zone, all that thing right now. We'll just stick with what's right there. So we're going to click save. So now we have a user. You can see Brian Jones. There's their alias. That's their email. This will be their username. So now we can actually start to create a support process. So we're going to go back to our setup. Go setup home. And what's great about this Salesforce is their search options for their processes. So I'm just going to type in support, and support processes pops up. And we're going to make a new support process. We'll leave this set to master. And the support process that we're going to do, we'll say new product support. Goodness. And a brief description. Will be a process for logging support cases. And hit save. And we'll do new. These are our case statuses here. We have new, working, escalated, and closed. So those are our three values we're working with. And we're going to hit save here. And as you can see, our new product support process was created. And we'll do an additional one. We'll create an inquiry support process. And with the process here, the description is going to be a process for logging customer inquiries. And hit save. There we are, adding our statuses here. And our new inquiry process is created. So now we've created these support process, but we need to start to kind of customize them for for our needs some more. So next thing we're going to do is we are going to create the fields and relationships that go along with this, with these cases. So we're going to go to our object manager, and we're going to go down to case, fields and relationships, and we're going to scroll down to get to type, and we're going to add pick list values to our case. So we'll hit new here, and we will do purchase orders. My typing apparently is broken today. I apologize. Purchase orders. We'll do P cards and receipts. Now these are going to be values in a pick list on the case that we're building. And we will then hit save. All right, so now we're going to make a record type. Remember, back to the PowerPoint, these are all things that we kind of outlined and covered. So now we're going to create the record type of product support. So what we're doing here is we're going to click new. Now this here is going to be a new product support. Now, mind you, you can name these anything you want that are going to be specific to your business and your use case. I'm just doing the demonstration here is how do you do this? If you use your imagination, you can create these case types and record types be very, very unique to your needs. So we'll click on our new support process, new product support process, and our description is going to be the record type for product support cases. And one thing to keep in mind here, we have to make sure this stays active so we can actually interact with it in the instance. If this box is not checked, we won't be able to use it. And we're going to make this available to all of the profiles and the record types that correspond with those. So we're going to hit next. Page layout we're going to do is the case page layout. So we're going to choose. So this is going to be to apply to one layout to all profiles. So all profiles that are in the system that interact with this case type will have this case layout. And we're going to hit save. And then we're going to create one more record type, which will be the inquiry record type. And we'll say new inquiry record type. Now, the reason I'm doing two different record types is to show you that you can add different types of criteria to them. And the process will be the new inquiry record type process, the support process, new inquiry process. And remember, we want to make this active. And make available to all profiles. Hit next. Again, the same page layout. We're using the case page layout. And we're going to hit save. Now, we've essentially created the cases. We created the page layout, the record types, all of that. What we now need to do is we need to create a queue for these cases to go to once they get created. So we're going to head back to our object manager. We're going to go to our setup here and just search for queues. And what we'll do is we'll create a new queue. So we'll say this is tier 1 support case. We don't have to do an email here. Now, the available objects. So what are we going to select here for available objects? And we're going to select our case object here. Sorry, I lost my mouse for a second. So select case, we're going to add it and move down the line. Now our user that we did, who's going to be the member of these queues, You can add as many members that are in your system, but for the sake of this, we're just going to add the one user that we chose and hit save. So now you can see here, our tier 1 support is there. And we're going to make one more for tier 2 support. The reason we're creating these tiers is for case escalation. Is if the first queue can't get to it, or it needs to be escalated to a second queue, that's how this works. So we're going to add cases to this again for the available objects. We'll put Brian Jones again in there. We'll add and save. And as you can see, our tier 1 support, tier 2 support. So now we've essentially created the queues. The last thing that we're going to need to do is we need to create some rules in escalation that apply to this case type. So we'll go back to our home here, and we're going to search for escalation. There's our escalation rules. And let's make a new one. And we'll say the new rule here is going to be new case escalation. And again, we want to ensure that this is active. Let's save here. There it is. It is now active. We'll click back on it, new case escalation. And we need to add some rules here because we don't have any. You can notice this is completely empty. So we will run this rule, or sort order, we're going to put 1. So we'll run this rule if any of the criteria are met. And say, give me one moment here. We'll use the business hours. So the case open, where's my open? All right, give me 1 second. I apologize for my delay here. There we go. Case record type equals product support. There it is. And we will hit save. Now we have our escalation rule. So the next thing we're going to do is create an additional escalation rule for our tier 2. Okay, you know what? I think for the sake of this, we won't even need to do the escalation rules because we're not going to have enough time to show you how an escalation works. I think it actually would be pretty beneficial to actually show you how cases get created now that we've created all these cases. So a big call out that I want to show right off the bat is we don't have access to what's called the community portal, where that's how customers would actually be able to log cases. So what we do is we're going to have to use our imagination a little bit and imagine that we are external users creating cases. But you notice I kind of did a test case here, but we want to make a new one. So we're going to hit new. And we're going to say this case type is going to be a new inquiry record type. So we'll hit next. Now our contacts we'll use, I have a user in the system already. We'll do a search. Actually, we'll just create a new contact. And we will say, let's say Sam, last name Crawford. Now, let's say this account doesn't exist in the system. We'd actually be able to create an account right now. But it turns out Sam works at Timmy's Tortilla Town. It's a beautiful establishment, amazing tacos. I highly recommend it. And we'll say Sam's email is sam@mailinator.com with the phone number of 555-222. All right, and we'll hit save. So what is he inquiring about? Well, Sam is actually inquiring about he would like a journal entry corrected for the reason I bring the journal entry, the whole point of all this is integration into Oracle. How do we start there? Well, we start with the case. So if the user at Creoal knows, well, this is a journal entry case type, they know now there's certain information, things they're going to need from Sam to continue to support this case. So let's say there was it's other is the reason, and our status is new, the priority of high. And the case origin here is going to be done via email. And we're going to hit save. As you can see here, this case has been created. If I go back to my cases list view and I do all open cases, remember, this is our list view. This is going to be all the open cases. And now I see Sam Crawford has an open case with a high priority. What does he need? I can then immediately get to work on this case. I know Sam's email. I can correspond with Sam immediately. I can find out what they need. This is my favorite part. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see more of the screen. I can begin to create tasks and assign activities to coworkers that I may need help on, where I would create activities here. I can add attachments. So I make a new task, and I can assign a task to myself, to other individuals that may help me assisting with Sam Crawford's case and helping him with his journal entry. So that's essentially case management. It's how a case gets created. And like I said, the imagination here is how can this help someone that deals with Oracle on a daily basis? Well, think how many emails get sent out back and forth with FBDI templates, with all these different types of data loads that are happening in an unsecure fashion via email. The idea here is to have all this in one repository, use the cloud database, use cloud storage, use all these things where you can create trackable metrics. You can create anything you could possibly think of to aid in doing your accounting via Oracle. So many things get lost in the shuffle because of things are being done via email. I mean, you'd be surprised how many large companies are still handling their communication stream between themselves and their customers via email. We're talking sensitive documents, invoices, purchase orders, you name it, things that have important data all the way from social security numbers to credit card numbers. All that can be handled in an encrypted way in Salesforce to where everything is clean and efficient. And, in my opinion, it's just a better way to handle all these types of things. So Kelly, that's pretty much all of it from beginning to end. How do you create a user? How do you build case types? How do you then even create cases? How do you manage your cases? How do you respond to your cases? So that's pretty much I'll turn it over to you if there's any questions for the group. I'd love to answer them.
Yes, thank you, Jordan. This has been very informative. We did have a couple of questions. Number one being, how customizable can you make these use cases?
So you can have, without saying the word unlimited, the idea is you can, whatever your business needs, you can create a case type for it. I mean, I did a support case type and an inquiry case type, but that may not be the beginning of it. Let's say you're a retailer and you want to create a case type for, fall sweaters. I mean, you can create a case type for the new fall sweaters. You can reach out to your customers. Anything you think of, you can create a case type for it. It's incredibly customizable. We were on a project, Creoal did an implementation where we created 175 unique case types. So I know for a fact it can be done. Some of it can be done with code. Most of it can be done out of the box. So it's incredibly customizable.
And to follow up, the same with record types. How customizable are the record types?
Same thing there. And what's beautiful about the record types is that's where you get really customizable page layouts. You can have specific page layouts for specific users and specific teams. So all of that is your imagination is kind of the limit.
Thank you. Another question here. How do the queues relate to case type?
Perfect. So the queues, the easiest way that I find to explain a queue is think of a queue like an aisle at a grocery store. Or actually, let me flip it around. Think of a queue like the line at a grocery store, and you're allocated to line 2. That's everything that's in that line is only available to you. Now, if you go to a different grocery store, let's say a grocery store number 1 is one case type, grocery store number 2 is a different case type, you're going to be in a different line. You'll have a different queue, and you'll have different things and different people you interact with in that queue. So case types, as infinite as they can be, you can actually make the queues as infinite, but you can also make them even more streamlined, where if people overlap, they can overlap queues. It's just, again, it comes down to your specific needs and use cases as a business. You know, this is the beauty of requirements gathering, as we know, we find out, you know, what suits your needs the best from a queues perspective.
Thank you. I hope that answers their question. If you have any additional questions, you can always drop them in the chat and use the raise your hand feature. One more that just came in is, can external users create cases?
Yes, and I kind of covered that a little bit. It's a different license, but it's absolutely possible, and it's actually, in my opinion, the biggest game changer of Salesforce is your customer base interacting with you through what to them feels like Salesforce, and it's how they can create cases. They can interact with you via chatter, especially with the new Slack integration that Salesforce, they just purchased Slack. There's so many different features that open all this up. It's similar to Oracle Social, but the idea here is external users can absolutely create cases at their whim. They can track them just like anything else, and if the organization allows them to, they can create reports and do that sort of thing off of all those interactions.
Thank you, Jordan. Again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on our website later today. I thank you all for attending. And if there's nothing else, we will talk to you soon. Please look forward to our additional webinars coming in the months to come. Thank you. Thanks, Jordan.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
I don't see any additional questions, so I think we can call it a day. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.